Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey. On this episode, I have interviews from the recent Vancouver Island Construction Association annual conference held in Victoria, BC. The first interview is with MNP Consulting Services partner Susan Mowbray, who give attendees a look at the current economic situation of Vancouver Island and explain where opportunities for innovation would allow the construction industry to adapt to changing demographics and an increasingly shrinking labor pool. She added that artificial intelligence is an opportunity for employers to both streamline what they do, but also compete more effectively. Here's that interview. You just did a presentation on innovation and construction at the VICA conference. You kind of laid the table stakes as to how things were and are in terms of population and economics. So maybe you could start with that.
So what we've seen is that over the last 10 years or so, we've seen a 20% increase in the population on Vancouver Island. And going forward, we're expecting continued population growth. What we've learned, so we've seen the equivalent of the regional district of Nanaimo move to Vancouver Island over a 10-year period. And over that period, we've seen pressure on our infrastructure. And as our population grows, we have increased demand for things like services, as well as housing, schools, hospitals, energy, and all these things. And so right now, we're at a crossroads where we haven't been able to keep pace with demand. So going forward, we really need to think about how is it that we can do things differently so we can address some of these pressing concerns that are starting to affect our long-term economic prospects.
And you said the silver lining, and I'm using air quotes here, and you were too, is that everybody's kind of going with this lower growth, including China, probably because of and as well as China.
Yeah. So there's the big part of what's going on now as we've come out of the pandemic is we're looking at lower levels of economic growth in Canada, and part of that is because there's lower levels of growth in the expected going forward globally. But within Canada, one of our big issues and within BC is productivity. Our productivity is not growing. It's flat. And what that means is that going forward, our standard of livings are not going to be rising. And in fact, they might start to fall, which means, which has implications for, the well-being of our population.
Next thing is you kind of shattered a widely held belief that Vancouver is where all the retirees go. That has not been true for quite some time, and it's going to continue to not be true from what you say.
Yeah, so if you look at the data and who's been coming to Vancouver Island, what you see is that there are certainly people that come to Vancouver Island who are approaching retirement or coming here to retire, but the vast majority of people who have been moving to Vancouver Island over the past 10 years are in their prime working years. They're in that 25 to 54 age group, and they're coming here because it's the amenities, the lifestyle, and the opportunities. There are opportunities for employment, there's opportunities to be able to raise your family, and all those things draw people to an area that's less expensive in places like Vancouver or Toronto.
But you also point out that people going at 25 to 54, A, that will raise productivity because that's the years they're in, and B, they're coming here because of that. But you also, besides that, said we're also, because our older and younger people, you're going to need more infrastructure and of different sorts.
Yeah, so if we look at sort of what the population is aging, people are living longer, and at the same time we have more people coming. So instead of having a pyramid, we have more of a rectangle, and that changes the mix of what we're going to need to be providing. We're going to be providing a lot of things at both ends of the spectrum. So you're going to need more schools, but you're also going to need more healthcare facilities and more supports for seniors. And so what does that look like going forward? And how are we going to build that infrastructure to support this population?
You also pointed out that COVID kind of forced the hand of a lot of companies where they changed their processes and now they're not going back, but they would have never done that if it wasn't for COVID.
Yeah, so often, there's a resistance to change for various reasons. Like, if it's not broken, why should I fix it is often sort of the mindset that you have. But, COVID was a catalyst for a lot of companies where they were forced to change how they did things. And I know in some of the work we did, we talked to a construction company, and because of the physical distancing requirements, they had to change how they deployed their resources. And so they started to focus on a particular day all their resources on a particular site or a group of trades. And what they found is that things got done more quickly. It lowered their costs, it shortened timelines, and they were like, hey, great, we're going to keep doing this regardless of once the physical distancing requirements were removed. But without the catalyst that was COVID, they would never have explored that.
And now we're coming up to another catalyst, which is AI. What can it do for the construction industry at this moment?
So what AI is basically it ingests a huge amount of information. It looks for patterns in that data, and it makes predictions. And the current state it makes those predictions based on human interaction, like with a human prompt. And so within the construction industry, you can look at areas like the permitting process. Is there opportunities to have AI aid with getting the permitting process sped up and reducing the time it takes to get a permit? Can you use AI to sort of look at your workflows or look at where people are spending their time and figure out more efficient ways to deploy your workforce, or use it to sort of automate processes in the back office that can free up your staff to do other more higher value things? And so those are some of the things where you can see AI starting to have an impact. You can also combine it with other technologies such as drones to help with quality assurance. So you can get the drones to collect the data on the site and where things are, have AI do the initial assessment and flag any potential quality assurance issues. At that point, you can have a human step in and say, yeah, okay, let's figure out what to do. And so that can really speed up that whole quality assurance process. It can be built in at not just at the end, but it can be built in at various stages, which will reduce the amount of rework that needs to be done.
And just to take about where we were before, there doesn't seem to be any choice in the matter. People are going to have to change based on everything you listed, population and productivity and all the rest of it.
Well, we know that we can't build enough infrastructure. We haven't been able to build enough infrastructure to keep up with population growth. And if we look forward, we're not seeing a huge number of people entering the industry. It's not like the industry employment is going to grow. So we have to do things differently. And that's going to be the catalyst. So those companies that take the leap now in the near term are going to be the companies that are still going to be around 10 years from now. Whereas if companies who continue to do things the same way they've always done are going to get left behind. I don't think you should fear AI. I think you should fear the people who are using AI that you're competing with.
You also pointed out a picture from 100 years ago where cow milkers were on strike or protesting because it had been automated. And so you said, well, where are the cow milkers now? Like, it's not a question of jobs getting replaced. It's a question of anyone does a bunch of jobs more efficiently.
Yeah.
But that's in the future.
That's in the future. So what happens typically when you do this is that you redeploy people. It's not that we're eliminating jobs. It means you're not going to be hiring as many people to do this job in the future. You're going to be hiring people to do different jobs. And so overall employment is still going to increase. There's still going to be jobs for people. It's just that they're going to be doing different things.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Our second interview is with immigration, refugee, and citizenship lawyer Sarah Goodman, who spoke at the VICA conference about some of the pathways to hire skilled workers from overseas. She outlined not only well-known programs for temporary foreign work and pathways to permanent residency, but also highlighted ways in which foreign workers with enough skilled trades experience in our home countries can attain a Red Seal certification.
The VICA construction conference, and we talked about immigration and construction. You listed off all the different programs people can immigrate and all the different sort of pitfalls they fall into or advantages companies have in getting them. So maybe you could give the ones that are most relevant to construction.
Yeah, so construction employers have a variety of options in order to get employees here in Canada. There's some permanent resident pathways as well as some temporary pathways. Right now there is preference given to construction workers both in the federal and provincial permanent resident pathways. And with respect to the temporary resident pathways, we have trade agreements with a number of countries that allow a variety of construction workers to get work permits in Canada. Outside of those construction-based work permits, we also have international experience class work permits or working holiday permits, young professional permits, as well as Francophone mobility work permits for individuals with intermediate French language ability and a job offer.
And that one doesn't apply to Quebec, which surprised me.
I know, isn't it? I think it was I can only speculate that it was perhaps a bargaining chip between the federal government and the Quebec government to make sure that we had some more French language speakers located across Canada.
Now, one of the things that was mentioned is that the skilled trades, there's a skilled trade stream, but that was only created in December. So maybe you could kind of go into more details of that, because that's something that people are clamoring for.
Yeah. So as of several months ago, the federal government started, both actually the federal and provincial governments have started doing occupation-based draws in the construction industry. And so if somebody is currently working in Canada in a skilled construction position, or even if they're working outside of Canada in a skilled construction position, they may be able to immigrate to Canada as a permanent resident quite quickly.
Another thing that was asked from the audience was Red Seal. And you said, or actually I think one of the other people may have said it, that people who have enough skills coming in, as long as they've got somebody who can back them up and say, yeah, they work these hours, can get a Red Seal.
That is correct. And so we do have something called equivalency here, where if someone who has skilled trades work experience overseas can get a former employer to attest to how many hours they have, they may be able, they are able to fast track directly to the Red Seal exam without having to do any additional hours. And so it is quite a straightforward and user-friendly process.
Now, you also talked about practical things that you're not going to find on the website, but they actually occur. Like, for instance, people in countries surrounding Ukraine or Ukraine itself, or in the Middle East, they're just going to take longer for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, that is correct. So, work permit processing times vary across the world according to which visa office they're being processed in. And really it goes for permanent residents as well, because if the applicant's not located in Canada, their application will be processed by a visa office outside of Canada. And so we typically see processing times vary depending on what's happening in the world at any given time. So right now, at the end of March, a program expired which allowed Ukrainian nationals to apply for an open work permit to come to Canada. It was called the Canada-Ukraine Emergency Travel Program. And these folks could apply for open work permits to come here, but often they were located in countries outside of of Ukraine, in neighboring countries for safety reasons, and are applying to come to Canada from those countries, which has caused the processing times in those countries to balloon. And, we've also recently seen some political issues bubble up in the Middle East, which is causing people to go to neighboring countries and apply for permits from there, and that too is causing work permit processing times in those regions to increase.
So basically, a conflict zone, unfortunately, means it's going to be more trouble on top of the problem.
It's going to be longer, much longer.
But then there are other countries like the Philippines and India where it's apparently streamlined. Is that because we've been doing it for a long time, or is it just they have a better setup there, or how does that work?
I think we typically get a lot of people from those countries, and so the visa offices are set up to handle, I think, high capacity, and they're very good at processing work permits quickly. Yeah.
And so, what are some? If you're a construction, say you're a contractor, you're looking to hire. What are some things you may not know about that you should look at in terms of programs?
Oh gosh, I would take a look at the trade agreements that we have with certain countries and what countries they cover. And, I know that my employer clients receive job applicants from people all over the world. And so, you want to familiarize yourself with the countries that are covered by these trade agreements, as well as through the working holiday program. Because if you receive an applicant from one of those countries, they may be able to qualify for one of those LMI exempt work permits.
Right. Yeah. Another thing I I was looking at, as I remember years ago, I reported on these, I think it was Colombia, but it was a South American country. They got hired by an Italian company that was working on the Canada line, and they were getting paid minimum wage.
Yeah.
And these are guys that should be getting paid $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
They were way more qualified.
Yeah.
And so they just didn't have any money, and they eventually sued and they won.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the governments at all levels have kind of taken care of that, or at least have addressed that issue. Right?
Yes, and so for many immigration programs with a focus specifically on labor market impact assessment based work permits, which are often needed to apply for permanent residence these days, there is a requirement to pay the worker the median wage rate for the occupation. And the reason the government has implemented that requirement is so that foreign workers in Canada do not put downward pressure on the wages of Canadian citizens and permanent residents. And so, several types of work permits do require the employer to pay the median wage rate for the occupation.
And finally, because we do have people listening in other parts of the world, if somebody's a construction professional looking to work in BC, what advice would you give them to sort of prepare themselves ahead of time before they take the leap?
Yeah, I would talk to an immigration lawyer or an experienced consultant, immigration consultant, licensed, to develop a pathway in order to come here. So you really need to plan ahead and figure out what you need to have in place in order to make your dreams come true. There should be a plan in place.
Great, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Construction Record Podcast. You can hear us on Amazon Music, Apple Music, and Spotify, as well as on constructconnect.libsyn.com and the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks again.